All right, we are going to talk quickly about how different techniques of building up your plate. You guys saw the example of my plate. I took a picture and uploaded it. I outlined it in Sharpie just because there are going to be things on these boxes. They're recycled, and it makes it easier to kind of see your lines and where you want things to be. You could also have used this side. Does not matter. I just chose to use this side. Before you start building it up, it is smart to trace it on a piece of, it could even be a piece of notebook paper. I just used a piece of printer paper. But the reason that we want to do this is because if I have this here and I know that this is exactly the shape I'm trying to cut out of my cardboard to make a collagraph and to build the plate up, I obviously can't see through cardboard to other cardboard. Paper is a little bit transparent, so I could see my plate and the markings I made on my plate through the paper, but we're not going to be able to see through this. So it's helpful to have this as a tool so that then, if I say, okay, well, I'm going to cut out the part of the frog's head, minus the eyes that I can see, so then I can cut that out of this paper and use that as a template to trace onto my cardboard to make it the right size. So I think that is a really helpful tool. I'm not going to require that you do that, but there may be some inaccuracies that you are not able to address unless you do it this way. So, it may be that like, oh, I just couldn't get it the perfect shape, so it's a little bit off. And if you had done it this way, then there's a much better chance that you'd be able to address those inaccuracies. So we were having a drill while I'm doing this. I don't know how many students in here. So I'm just cutting out, I'm not cutting out the eyeballs because I don't want that to be part of this layer of my cardboard. So I'm just cutting out the part that would be, I guess, the frog's skin, because that's the part that I want to emphasize on this section of my collagraph. And again, this is just an exact trace of my plate so that I can use it as a template onto the other piece of cardboard. All right, I'm gonna put this to the side because I might still need it for something, so I'm gonna put it over here. Like if I wanna cut out something inside the eyes, I would wanna have that. So now we got this, which looks kind of funny, but it should fit exactly on your plate, whatever area you were trying to trace, it should fit exactly in that area. So, you've been given different thicknesses of cardboard. You have these very, very thin ones, which would be some kind of like packaging or box, cereal or Little Debbie's or whatever. You have these much thicker ones, which were like shipping boxes. And then we also had in your thing that was sent home, these that are kind of an in-between. They're not as thin as a cereal box, but they're not as thick as the regular shipping box. This is the, I guess if you have this part of it, it's the small rate flat box. They're stiffer than this, but not as stiff as the other. So this is what I'm gonna use for my frog's body, because I'm thinking about like how high the cardboard is and how that's going to be affected whenever I put the ink on my plate to print it. So generally the lower areas are gonna hold the most ink because the ink gets caught in those areas. So I've got my head here. I'm gonna lay it down on my cardboard and then I'm just gonna use a pencil because I think I'll be able to see that just fine on here to trace this template so that I know exactly the shape and size to cut this piece to layer on top of my plate. Do not try really hard, and I know it's hard when you're looking at something, but try really hard not to associate like whatever pattern might be on the piece of cardboard that you're using. Don't think about that as being part of your print because we're just printing it in one color of ink. So you're not gonna see, that this has this marking on it or anything, or that this might have had anything on it. That is not gonna be visible when we actually print. So try really hard not to let that throw you off. So I'm gonna cut out along my template line. I'm gonna cut around the eyes and then cut those afterwards. I think it'll be easier to cut it once this piece of cardboard is smaller. Now, you don't need to cover 100% of your plate with other pieces of cardboard. It's okay to have some that is just the background, and you'll see kind of in the printing demonstration of this, that you don't need that. It doesn't need to all be covered completely. Okay. Now I'm going to cut out the inside of these eyes because I want there to be a distinction between the skin and the eyeballs. I don't want them to run together, so I'm going to cut this piece out. I'm going to save that. I might end up using it for something else. So now this will fit perfectly right here. Now obviously, now that this is on here, you know, we don't see the lines for the mouth and the wrinkles in the face to show the form of the face anymore. It's all blocked out. So what we're going to need to do is use other collagraphing techniques to go back on top of this new piece of cardboard to show to re-show those details. We don't want to leave those details out. So I'm just going to use a pretty heavy amount of this glue to stick down the cardboard. If you have liquid glue at home or Mod Podge at home for this step in the process, you're welcome to use that on your plate. But this glue will work just fine too, especially because in the end we are going to seal all of this up with Mod Podge. So as long as everything can at least be held in place by this glue, when we move on and seal it up before we print it, it'll all definitely get held in place. So I'm making sure I kind of put that in the right spot. I'm pushing down all my areas. Now, I need to think about, you know, what I'm going to do to show these details, like the mouth, and then sort of where the face comes forward and underneath the lip of the animal. I need to think about what I'm going to use. Now, I want these details to be seen very easily, but they don't need to be maybe quite as prominent as the frog needs to be from the water and from the background. So I'm thinking I will use, for those details, the really thin cardboard and cut, you know, just a thin line of cardboard that is this shape and put it here on the frog. So I'm going to lay this on top and push down really hard so that it's making an indentation in the cardboard, and I'll just use that as my guide to cut it. So you can probably barely see it, but there's an indentation right there. And I'm going to use that as my guide to cut this much thinner. I'm going to go ahead and remove it from the rest so it's easier to maneuver. And just following the same curve so that now I've got this thin piece to show the detail of the frog's mouth. Didn't cut off quite enough. And so I'm going to glue this here. I'll also glue in pieces to show these details. I'm not going to do all of that in this demonstration because it would make it really long. This is something that's going to take some time, and I'm not going to record myself doing all that. I just need to let that dry. I'm going to push this down again. And again, if it's not pushed down all the way perfectly in every single area, remember we're sealing it with Mod Podge at the end, so that's okay. All right. So what I wanted to show you was how I did this technique in the background. I thought that this would be interesting in my background. It maybe would look like, what are those called? Like reeds coming up out of a pond, or cattails or something, just sort of that vertical texture in the background. What I did is I just used my scissors, and if you have an X-Acto knife that you're allowed to use at home, this would be a good time to use that. But I just used the scissors to cut around the areas where I want the peeling to stop. I wanted it to stop when it reached the surface of the water, and I obviously wanted it to stop around the contour of the frog's head. I didn't want to pull any of that off, so I cut around. Again, an X-Acto knife or some kind of box cutter that you're allowed to safely use at home would be really useful for this. You can be a little bit more precise, but if you had to, you can use the scissors. So now that I've cut around that, and I want to do this section too, but just for the purpose of the demonstration, I'm not going to make. So you got to kind of peel it, find it a weak edge, and peel it off so that we see that corrugated cardboard underneath. And it's going to take a couple times. Like I want to leave some of it like I left here, but I don't want to leave all of it like this. So it's going to take some time to kind of go back in and remove these different areas. You may want to use something to kind of pick it out if your finger isn't cutting it. There we go. That kind of thing is going to just give us an interesting texture when we print. And you may want to be more diligent about peeling off every single strip of the cardboard. I don't. I purposely want that to be there. So I'm going to finish this out, cutting around this edge and peeling that off to show this texture in the background. I'm not going to do that in this video demonstration, just to keep it short. The last technique I want to show you is using glue and letting it dry raised up. So if you have liquid glue, you can use it. I'm going to use it to show the ripples in the water. So I'm just making a real consistent line here. Making one here just to show the ripple of the water where the frog is coming out. And you could use this to show any type of thing that you're capable of drawing with the glue. So, I could even use this here to show like the facial, like kind of the structure of the frog's face too if I wanted. If I wanted it to look different than the mouth. So just go in, and any areas that you think could benefit from being outlined. When that glue dries, we have to give it time, let it dry for quite a while. But once it dries, it's going to dry raised up like that, and that'll create lines in our Collagraph print as well. So we're going to just do that all over. I'm not going to, again, in the video, I'm going to cut that short. I'm not going to do it the whole time because you guys don't need to watch me do all that. I'm just trying to show you different examples. So you'll continue building and building until you see all the level of detail and all the different shapes and textures that you want to be visible in your Collagraph plate. After you've gotten everything you want, I'll be sending home a tiny little cup of Mod Podge, and you'll use a paintbrush to seal the entire thing on the front, the sides, and the back very thoroughly so that it's more or less pretty waterproof and we're able to ink it up without the ink soaking into every single crevice. We want it to just kind of sit on top of it. Think really creatively about how you can layer and use this cardboard. Especially the thin cardboard, it's very versatile. If I had something that had scales, for example, you could be layering these as individual scales on top of your thing, and it's going to show all of that texture and all of that detail like you saw in some of the examples that I posted in the PowerPoint that we started off this unit with. So just think really creatively about how you can use materials that you have. You're also welcome to use things that you have at home. If I'm sending home these pieces of cardboard, but if you have fabric you wanted to use, or yarn, or even sometimes people take like raw spaghetti noodles and break them and put them on. So like back here, I could have maybe done something like that with the spaghetti noodles to show those straight lines. There's lots of options, and be creative with it. Think of all the alternative things you can do to kind of achieve the different shapes and lines and textures that you want to show on your plate.